All right, welcome back to the Juiced Up Podcast, round two here. Little viewers last time kind of said that Maynard talked a little bit too much, so we're going to switch the dynamic up a little bit, and
Yeah, I'm gonna ask him questions.
he's going to drill me with some questions. We'll kind of go on some rants as well, but what do you got?
Well, we wanted to start today. Last week we talked a lot about our background and our stories, and just kind of just talked and went to see where the conversation led. What was our inspiration behind speaking in a setting like this, doing a podcast? So what I wanted to focus on a little more, and Grant thought it would be a good idea as well, to talk more specifically about what goes behind our process and our training, and what's formed our thoughts, what Grant uses with his athletes, what we used in our careers, how I train now, how you train now, all of that. So for yourself, can you just start and tell us about your inspiration? Tell us why this part of life, why this is your career, why this is something that you're feeling so strongly about, why you have your ideas, what maybe some of your biggest inspiration is. So can you just give everyone a little bit of background and teach me something too? I know a lot about you, but I don't know everything. I just remember back to EGT, but
Yeah, for sure. So I'll touch on that, but so myself as an athlete, I always kind of enjoyed the preparation process. So whether that be getting after in the weight room, or even just the extra hours that went into, preparing for the game. And the more and more I kind of grew in my college career, I just found more enjoyment in like the behind the scenes, like getting better and getting faster and getting stronger and all that stuff, because of the fact that I was never the most skilled athlete. Like I was always like one of the more skilled players on the team, but I was never the top of the line. So I had to kind of always work my way into the lineup. And so that kind of allowed me to kind of fall in love with, I guess as cliche as it sounds, kind of fall in love with the process of things and all that goes into it. And so that kind of led me down a bunch of different avenues of strength and power and speed, specifically in the weight room, but also just kind of how to optimize myself with the swing and getting the best results out of that. So that's kind of how I've always touched on why I got into this. Is I've just always enjoyed the process of training.
So would you say that there was a moment where it became, because I know we've talked to a lot, your responsibility as you get older in college is with training a lot of the younger players or helping people out and being more of a research source. So is there ever a moment when you can remember it becoming, this is less of my personal development, less and more of I want to use what I know to help others out?
Yeah, I think especially when I got to Brian, I feel like because I kind of, showed a little bit of results on the field, showed a little bit of results of like kind of what I was doing in the weight room, the way our team lifts were kind of structured. We had team lifts, but at the same time, they were kind of eyewash like most college programs. And so I was always doing stuff on my own, and I was doing some like weird stuff. Like I was like attaching bands to dumbbells and like all this weird kind of things. And I think kind of like guys started to see some things working, see that there was, more to it than just a trap bar deadlift or a reverse lunge or some med ball throws into the wall. And so they kind of started picking my brain about, like, should I do this here? Should I do that there? And I think that's kind of when I started to enjoy, helping others with their training, because for the longest times it was just, how can I get good at this? And the big part of what I'm trying to do with athletes I'm now is like build a community for them to ultimately build upon one another, and like me just become almost like a spectator during their sessions. Obviously I want to be there for them as a resource and, help them out when needed. But I think that's the beauty of all of this, is that guys can kind of start to formulate their own thoughts on what works for them. Because the reality is that I can give them all the tools and all the exercises, but if it's not working for them, I can't keep it confined to like what my program is, right? So I got to have flexibility in there for, athlete A versus athlete B, and how they can, just kind of work to find a system that works for them. So I'd say like, yeah, to answer that question, at Brian, I kind of started to work with some other guys, and we had our own group going and stuff like that. And so just the environment was pretty cool.
Do you feel like in your team setting that those cliques kind of form of like people who train one way, people who train another way? It becomes kind of a battle of the results. Like you said, it kind of once you started having results, then people actually start thinking all this weird stuff he's doing, maybe there's something to it. Do you feel like that can be good? Do you think that's a good thing for a team that everyone's kind of doing their own thing, or do you think it should be centralized and everyone be on the same plan?
Yeah, yes and no, because I think like you can be doing all these weird things, but if they ain't working, like something's wrong, right? Like, so if you're just
Right.
doing weird things to do weird things, right? And you're not getting the results out of it, because at the end of the day, the results have to play, right? Like, that's kind of the most important. I think
Mhm.
that there's pros and cons to that. I think, yes, I think it's cool to have everyone kind of centralized and doing the same thing just for like the team building aspect. And I kind of touched upon this in one of my posts too, is like, I
Yeah.
don't think team lifts as a whole are eyewash. I think the exercises and just like the program of it is eyewash. I think team lifts serve as a good way for guys to kind of, because I think weight room is just like you think of weight room and it's just you think culture. And so I think it's
Mhm.
a good way for you to kind of build your culture. I think if you had guys doing all of their own things, sure, they might be getting better, but it's like you just don't have enough. I feel like at that level, you don't have enough initiative for guys to take it upon themselves. Like you need to have some sort of system in place for the guys that just want to show up and leave. Because 95% of college athletes, they don't give a crap about max effort versus dynamic effort. Like
Yeah.
they're just showing up to be there. And so if
Yeah.
that's the case, then you need to make sure that you have a system in check rather than making guys go off on their own and do their own thing.
Yeah. Because I remember for a lot of from my experience, we didn't necessarily have a set program, and there would be kind of divides sometimes. Or I was, and again, we can follow back the timeline and everything, but about senior year was when I really started seeing, oh, this really works for you, and you really know what you're doing, and you have stuff that you've proven with athletes that has worked. And I started doing a lot of that, and I didn't necessarily see results in the most obvious ways, but it kind of carried into the weight room that I went in with a plan. I went in, yeah, I was throwing bands on stuff. I was there. There were plenty of days in the Franciscan weight room where anyone was in there can say like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" I got the PVC pipe attached to the band because I don't so with the bands trying to push that as a warm up. What's that
Yeah.
called?
Well, see, that's the thing you mentioned. You said it right there. Like you had a plan. And I think it's kind of like, I'm sure we'll go down a lot of technical avenues in this podcast, but
Yeah.
like the bottom line is like if you have a plan, and that can be legitimately probably one of the worst plans ever, and you're a newbie to the weight room and you follow that terrible plan for 3 weeks,
Mm.
you're gonna get better because you're doing something, right? And so I think that's for like a lot of high school and college athletes out there. Like, do I think that you should invest in someone that knows more than you? Absolutely. But the reality is that more often than not, guys don't want to do that. And so my advice to them is just like find a plan, find something that you enjoy doing, right? If
Yeah.
that's attaching PVC pipes to a band and doing scapular protraction iso holds for 25 minutes, then that's what you're gonna do. But like if that's not it, then don't just do it because I said to do it and it
Yeah.
worked for me. Like find a plan that works for you and just freaking send it and do it.
Yeah, and that was part of the good interaction that I had was there was a lot of feedback where when I was training with you at home, it was more like, this is what you're doing. This is what you follow. When I was at school, it kind of gave me the freedom more when I'm helping. And I kind of took that because I ended up working with a lot of my teammates and helping. And it was funny because I was kind of the expert when it was really, I was just stealing a bunch of stuff from you and everyone else.
Well, dude, that's all I'm doing too. And I feel like
Well, yeah.
I hate when the like people in the field like try to come up with new ideas. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, there is no new idea. There's better implementation of ideas that have been around for centuries, but it's like me doing this exercise, it's
Yeah.
been done 5,000 times before. I just know that it works. And sure, I might have a better way to implement it with the population or implement it with the athletes that I work with or myself even. But I mean, it's nothing new.
Yeah, and that's why I asked, like, what was what challenges when you would have to train other teammates and when you started training other athletes? Because there's a lot of moments where I had in like as a trainer for sense where it's like maybe I do an exercise and it works really well for me, and I try and tell somebody else to do it, and for whatever reason it just doesn't work for them. It
Mhm.
doesn't activate but sometimes if you just do something simpler, if you just get them doing a different movement, everyone's different. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'd say is like to be adaptable and to be flexible.
And
And
bro,
that
you want to
also,
know what's crazy is like I feel like
yeah,
where I've learned that is not even with athletes. So I don't know if people on the pod listen, but I do physical therapy in the morning with like
Yeah.
85-year-olds at a rehab. And I also do some like Gen Pop training at people's houses. And like, believe it or not, I've actually learned a ton with working with that population because all they're doing all the time is complaining about how this hurts and that hurts. Whereas like an athlete, you're going to tell them to go do a freaking 3-minute dead hang and they're just going to go do a 3-minute dead hang. And then today,
Yeah.
I literally had it today with my client at his house and we were doing a minute, or we did a reverse shrug ISO and he couldn't even hold it for 20 seconds without his wrist starting to cramp.
Yeah.
All right, let's do dead hangs again because I wanted to kind of like decompress the, T-spine and stuff like that. And then his arm started to give out. And so it's like, well, crap, I never even thought about this. Like dead hangs are supposed to be quote unquote good for arm care. But what happens if it's not working for this guy? And I feel like you don't really learn about those types of things until you start working with a variety of people, whether that be, different sport athletes and kind of getting out of your box or even just working with, general population. That's why like I love, kind of working with a variety. Obviously the athletes are where I find the most value because that's just kind of who I am. But like I do enjoy that side of things too. I feel like you learn out a lot about yourself as a trainer and just a person itself too.
Yeah. And that, because and I'm starting to experience this a little bit now, just as I'm getting out of the routine of the athlete where it's, you have a sport, you have a schedule and everything. But at a certain point, you get to an age where it becomes less about just getting strong or getting results and more just about
living life.
How do I not get this lower back pain at 50 and need this huge procedure or need a knee replacement? Like, how do you prevent injuries? If something hurts, how do I take care of it?
Mm-hmm.
How do it's in the preventative way that it's how can I train in a way that I can be stronger and be a better mover as a human to avoid some of those complications down the line.
And it's like, even those types of individuals, it's like, sure, they might not be, I still consider them athletes because it's like, they're not competing in their sport, but like their goal is just to be able to like play on the ground with their kids or play on the ground with their grandkids or something like that, or be able to walk up and down the stairs pain free. It's like, so they still have a goal that they're trying to achieve. And I think that's the main thing with all of this. And is like, if you have a goal you're trying to achieve, like you can get there and you don't have to have like this tangible goal of like, oh, I want to be a D1 athlete. That's great. But like what I feel like when you have a deeper meaning behind that is when you really start to tap into some cool things.
So I have another kind of segue. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are the pros and cons to I'm kind of a workout noob. So my knowledge is I just want to go on Instagram or go on TikTok and cherry pick a bunch of exercises.
Mm.
What would you say to me with that? And what would you say? What would you say to someone that says that or someone that acts like that? Because obviously there's some very easy pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to see the good art exercise, but you don't have the coach there giving you the feedback. So you're going to do it in your own way.
Right.
But is there also something too, like you need to at a certain point just be able to do that on your own?
Yeah. Yes and no. I think that's a good question because like social media these days it's really great in the sense that like people are legitimately giving out free information more than ever before. But I think with every post that you see, whether that be like the best post that you think is out there or like the worst post, is like you have to take all those posts with context. And so I'll just take myself for example. The other day I posted a video of me doing T-spine pails and rails. Okay, so it's essentially just an overcoming isometric for your upper back. And so my goal with that is just I have zero spinal extension. So I'm trying to expand that, right? And so I just said the quick protocol of like how you do a pail and rail. And so Johnny, who saw that video, might try to go implement it for himself. But the problem is that number one, he doesn't even know what his maximal intensity looks like. And then number two, like who knows if that exercise is even, if he's even built up the capacity to do an exercise like that. And so I think that you see all these posts and it's like the clickbait posts. It's like 3 exercises for more rotational power. And every baseball player is going to click on that because they want to hit home runs or throw hard or throw gas. But I think the problem is that unless you have a general understanding of strength or a general understanding of the concept that you're looking at, you can't just take that post out of context and try to go implement it into your program and see results. And so I think that's where it comes back to the fact that like, you need to hire someone or pay someone or whatever it may be that knows more than you so that they can take that post that you saw and be able to implement it. Because if you have no idea of the concept that's being posted and you're just going to try to go do it like cold turkey or whatever the term may be, like you're just trying to do the exercise with no general understanding of what the adaptation you're trying to receive, then it's just going to be a constant cycle, and you're better just sitting on the couch and doing nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the danger of social media lies, especially in the health field, because like everyone and their brother is just posting workout videos. Everyone.
And it's a funny thing that I've kind of realized too, because I do for a lot of like the mobility stuff. So a lot of like that FRC, a lot of like stretching and warm up stuff. That's where I kind of have the phone out and I'm looking and stuff. But a lot of times that I realize, like sometimes I'm even doing something, and even if I'm glancing down at the phone, if I'm not keeping my neck up, then I can't really engage the muscles. So
Right.
unless you like walk, it's like you're internalizing it beforehand, kind of going through it, and you walk in the gym going, I've seen this, I'm comfortable with it, or I've had somebody work with me like that. I think that's why one of the biggest things you can do is to get a trainer that's specialized in your field. Because at the very least, you go to a couple of sessions and they give you a baseline for what are some exercises that if you're looking for something to do, this can help get you there. And eventually there's going to be a plateau. You're going to run out of ideas. Doing the same thing every week isn't going to work necessarily. And you need to change the stimulus. Cause like you said, maybe you build up a load for something. Maybe you build up that maximum capacity. And once you do that, it's almost like you're opening up new avenues to getting back into it. Like I said, like right now, I really haven't been lifting. I'm very honest, but I'm trying to get back into it. So right now, it's tempting. I see all this stuff on social media with people doing all sorts of fancy deadlifts and squats and everything. But for me, I need to get back into the routine. I need to get the muscles working. I'm just going to bench. I'm just going to squat. I'm just going to do movements. And then once I figure out through that, okay, what are my weaknesses? Then I can start getting a little more random with the exercises. I can have a little more of a better plan. So
you hit it head on right there. I think that people, they hold back for so long because they don't even know where to start. Like, oh, it's like, I got to fill this bucket and fill this bucket. But it's like, dude, like if you just let's say you go do a squat, right? Or you go do something.
Yeah.
Doing the squat is going to be your assessment. You're going to see where you fail. You're going to see where your weak points are. And then from there, you can just build. And I think that's where social media is great, is because so many guys do give out free information. And so while, yes, you need to make sure that you're taking the post in context, if you just reach out to I'm not saying that I have an amassed amount of following, but I'll respond to anyone, or even like these guys that I reach out to, I'm like, there's no way he's going to respond to me. And like, he's responding within an hour. And so like, guys, there's people out there that want to help you. Right. Yeah. But if you're just going out there and you're not really even trying to put yourself out there, whether that be starting a movement program or starting, training as a whole, it's like, if you're not taking that first initiative, then no one's going to want to help you in the first place.
And I think that's a big lesson too, that there needs to be a good deal of autonomy with it. That if, say, you're my coach and I'm asking you for information, typically at a certain point I should start. And we experience this in real life too, that at a certain point, it can't just be, hey, what should I do today? What should I do today? What's this? It's more like, hey, I want to do this for lower body. I need something to engage. My scap feels stuck. I feel like I'm off balance when I'm squatting. If you have more specific problems, if you have a video, if you have sort of or you have like a cue, like if something's hurting when you're doing something, at a certain point, you do need to be able to assess that on your own. Mm-hmm. Versus just hiring somebody to tell you what to do, right? And then just going in blind. Because if you do that, you're never going to learn.
Yeah, and I'll take that one step further in the sense that, like, I feel like if you are hiring that person and all they're doing is telling you what to do, it's not at that point. And I know I think this was on your sheet, but like at that point, it's not the athlete's fault; it's the coach's fault. Because if you're telling the athlete what to do, because the reality is that your goal as a coach is to be able to prepare them to go play at a higher level. And so that means is that you can't always be holding their hand in the weight room and telling them what to do. And I think like coaches have such a hard time, and myself included, you have such a hard time with that because obviously from a business side of things, you want it to look like you're helping that athlete grow and get to that next level. But as it's your greater purpose should be to help that athlete get to a point where he doesn't need to ask you every single question. Obviously, always be there as a resource for him. But
Yeah.
your job as a coach should not be to try to sell the athlete that you need them. It should be the other way around.
Yeah, and I think that was one thing we wanted to move into. So I think we can do the whole coaches versus athlete responsibility. Because the one thought that I had that, and you touched on it very well, I thought, is that the main thing I think that bothers players, whether it's in college, I definitely know what in pro ball and at any levels, is when coaches try to take responsibilities for any athletes who are successful, where they get the results. Anytime athletes who aren't successful, then they just say, oh, they're not working hard enough. They're not listening to me. They're not coachable. I think that's a big thing. And it really, it should be turned on its head. That chances are the best managers that you'll hear, the best coaches, when the athletes are successful, they will give credit to the players and say, look, I just set the lineup. I just told them I got them organized. They went out and played. They did what they were supposed to do. They were prepared. And I feel like as a coach, your job should be to raise the floor. Your job should be, hey, there's an athlete that's this and this and this, but I need to get him 2% better. I need to get him 1% better today. It might be as simple as someone is not great at ground balls, and maybe he just needs somebody to hit him ground balls. Maybe he just needs someone to explain something he's doing wrong. I think that's a big thing. And I think that's a turnoff for a lot of athletes when coaches just immediately try and say, these are my successful people. These are my not successful people. And you kind of establish that hierarchy. Because then as an athlete, you know who's working hard, who listens to coaches, who has good attitudes. You sense that within a team and within a group. And the coaching should be in line with that.
Absolutely. And I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this comment, but like what you're saying right there, it happens even at the highest level of our industry, right? Like you look at those top accounts, like the drive lines, the treads, the elite performance facilities of the baseball field as a whole. And it's funny because you'll scroll through their page, and I forget who I was talking with this about, but I think Tim Anderson's a driveline athlete, or like he worked at driveline for an off season or something. And it's like you scroll through their page, it's like you don't see no Tim Anderson going through the ringer like when he was freaking struggling this year. Like you just see the highlights of the athletes that they did. And I'm not knocking them by any means. Like we all do that. But it's just interesting that like even the top of the industry is falling into that trap too, because again, it goes back to the point that like you want to make it look like your facility and your testing and all your fancy equipment and all of this stuff is the reason why your athletes are succeeding.
Right.
And in reality, you're there, you're guiding the athletes. Your job should be to assist the athletes in their development. And it's about them. It's not about you. And as hard as that is to fathom, like that's the reality of it. And so when these guys go through the ringer and they're having a terrible season, why don't we post about that? Why don't we say like, hey, so-and-so's having a bad year. Maybe this is what we need to improve upon. It's just something to think about. I think it's something that, again, social media kind of idolizes because you always want to show the good, but never want to show the bad. So,
yeah, because I got a right brain thinking for you right now. But if you think about it, that if you're going to train somewhere, your expectation should be that if you go there, they're going to get you the results.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like when you go to the dentist and they clean your teeth and you have healthy teeth, they don't sit there taking all the credit for cleaning your teeth and getting you perfect teeth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of expected when you pay for something that's supposed to get you results and you get the results, it should be an expectation.
Right.
Because that is the thing in winning culture too, that at a certain point, you're not always celebrating every win. It does become an expectation. You expect to perform at the highest level. You expect your athletes to have a certain standard.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas more of the behind the scenes work should be, okay, how do you get everybody there? How do you really show like what is going behind that? Because it's almost like, because you think about it in a business stance, that you want to show success because you want people to see, oh, this person is why they're successful. No, the person that trained is why they're successful because they listened to the coaches, they made the changes on their own, they got to the pros, they got to the certain point. Like you said, the other person is just there to guide them. They're
Right.
giving that feedback. And so I think that would be another way to round to the social media comment too, or is your question too, is just to be careful of people that put too much faith into results. Because at the end of the day, it's very easy to put a nice, clean post together about everything that's to show it as a big straight line of progress.
Yep.
Realistically, like for everyone that tread Driveline's posting, that if they get 100 athletes, maybe 3 of them are really good marketable athletes. But there's a lot of people who are going to go in there and fail. There's going to a lot of people who are going to go in there. It's not going to work. And they're not going to talk about those in the sense
Nope.
that you don't want people to get the idea that it's your program that's failing them. And you're just getting, so that's where you're just going to be dismissive and say, oh, they didn't listen to us. Well, maybe you didn't give them anything to listen to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's a big thing for a coach to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, did I do what I can for every athlete? To say that I gave them the tools, I figured out what their assessments were, I helped them get a little bit better in the way that I recognize their individual needs. Because it's very hard to just have a cookie cutter approach and say that this works for everybody.
Yeah. And I think going back to the point of the fact that they didn't listen, again, I would just play devil's advocate. I think that's also your job as a coach because
yeah,
just from like a performance facility perspective, right? Or even at college, right? Like if you have guys that aren't bought into your program or you have guys that aren't bought into your business or your industry of what you're trying to build, that's on you for letting the athletes stick around. If they don't want to be there, okay, then you need again look yourself in the mirror and understand that their $300 or whatever they're paying is not worth the time and the hassle of you trying to, mentally tough them into your philosophy of things. Because the bottom line is that if they don't want to be there, then what they're doing then is they're lowering the standard that you've tried to create for your business or your college or whatever it may be. And now it's not only affecting that, but it's going to be affecting the guys that actually do want to be there. And so that just comes with having a reality of, or a sense of self-awareness of yourself as a coach of like, okay, what are the athletes that I do want training at this facility? Or what are the athletes that I do want in my program? And if those standards aren't met, obviously you're supposed to have grace. That's part of the process. But you can only you can't keep giving grace if this person's just going to keep taking advantage of you, right? And because it's going to lower what you're trying to build. And so I think again that it comes back down to the coach. It always comes back down to the coach, in my opinion.
And if you think about it, we're out of school now, but we were in it for so long, and we know people that still are. And essentially, coaches are teachers. And usually, I heard so many people throughout school. Everyone complains about the teachers. Nobody ever complains about the class, which is interesting because you think it's similar with coaching too. That a lot of times, if somebody doesn't understand something, it's not because they don't like the subject or they don't like what's being taught. It's because they don't like the way it's being taught and they're not communicating. And I think there is a point of responsibility of the teacher where you have to know that feedback and you have to be able to evaluate, are people listening to me? Do people enjoy hearing what I have to say? Do people listen to me? If I tell somebody to do something and they don't, is it because maybe they have some wall that hurts their ability to think in a certain way? Do I need to change my approach? Because I had a conversation too.
I think.
And I had a conversation with one of my good friends who's a teacher too, and we talked a lot about how you learn a lot from your students because they challenge you to adapt and find things within yourself that you need to correct about how you explain your ideas. So I mentioned EGT earlier, and you can explain the joke behind that and why I reference it like that. But that was kind of your first real dabble into the social media training area. But can you explain the difference of how your approach has evolved, like what a training session in EGT would have looked like compared to what it looks like now and what you're doing?
Yeah. So EGT was elite gate training, and it was after my freshman year of Wabanzi. And and I'm sure we'll kind of touch upon. We need to have an episode where we just like touch upon. I know we kind of did it, but like just that year as a whole, because that year was.
I mean, that was basically our first podcast, but we need to
go deeper into that. But essentially, after that year, like I was just so burnt out from baseball. I didn't play in the summer league at all, and I was just like, you know what? Like I'm just gonna freaking train as hard as I can. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't really understand training yet. I still was kind of just like lifting for, you know, aesthetics and whatnot.
Lifting for feels makes you feel good.
Yeah, and I think at that time, like my two buddies from high school, like were also like, "Yo, let's try to get a training page going." And I was like, you know, whatever. Like I know that I knew from like at that time, like I wanted to own a gym one day, and I was like, this would be a good experience to just kind of get some marketing out there. And dude, when I first started putting content out there, like it was number one, it was atrocious. I'm not saying that my content's good now, but I mean, it's
no. Give yourself some credit.
I do have some good content.
It looks good. It looks
Give
good.
me a follow at Grant Lala if you don't. But anyways, like I was editing on iMovie. I remember the first video I made was legitimately edited on iMovie, and I did like a little transition effect. And I mean, it's still up there if y'all want to go look at it. It's just elite. I think it's at elite_gate_training. The meaning, I have to say, if we get to a point where
that was a good like 45-minute text combo of me trying to
figure out a name. I do have to say, like the meaning behind that name was pretty cool. And if we do get to a point where, I don't know, down the line, that could be a potential business name opportunity.
The elite gate juiced up podcast.
I inspired it. I forget. I don't have my whatever. I was off of scripture verse. I don't know what it is from the Bible.
The narrow gate.
Yeah, the narrow gate. Like how you have to take the narrow gate to, you know, be a follower of Christ. And I just loved that meaning. And it's kind of what I've always viewed in the world of athletics too. It's that like number one, your path is never straight. It's always up and down. But also the sense that like I never wanted to have a space or a gym where I'm letting everyone and their mother come in and train. Like I wanted it to be the elite that took a narrow road to get to their path.
Yeah, you want to have a mechanism for making sure that people are really about it, because that is what heaven is. It's not just, you don't just get a participation trophy for life. You have to put in the work. You can clip that one.
Oh, but yeah, so that was elite gate training, and so that was kind of a rant. You asked like how training has evolved.
Yeah. What was like? So you mentioned that it was you talked about like the editing where you've grown, but like what about what were you doing in those training sessions compared to what I see following you now?
Dude, I think it was legitimately everything was just 4x12. Like I think we would just pick an exercise and just do 4x12 for everything. And that kind of goes back to my point. Like I think I was still very unexperienced in the weight room. Like we had, you know, lifts growing up and I was strong. But dude, it's like that program was absolutely eyewash, but we got better. And I think it just kind of shows that if you're what are you going to say?
I don't know anything about training. Why is a 4x12 eyewash?
It's not bad. Okay. So 4x12, 5x8, 6, like whatever, sets and reps, they don't really mean anything, but like all we were doing was essentially that saying, like all we were doing was training for a hypertrophy. We were doing high reps, low sets, and all we were doing was training for hypertrophy. And then we would do agility ladders for speed. We'd toss the football around. We were like doing these stupid like trap bar jumps and do it. Like literally we would do like 5 trap bar jumps followed by 3 hurdle hops into a burpee into a box jump. I don't know why. We just did it. It was stupid.
It could be,
but again, like we got better after that. I felt more athletic. I felt like just sticking to a program, quote on, like it wasn't even a program, but just like, I don't know, sticking to something. It worked.
All right.
Obviously today I'm not making everyone do 4x12s and burn the agility ladders and burn the J bands. Like that's definitely my process with all. But again, I say those things. Obviously, actually, yeah, burn the agility ladders. That's not even a question.
Yeah, the agility ladders. I think because this is a good conversation too. Like what are some eye wash exercises? Like if you see someone doing this in a gym, you just laugh and say like, "What are you doing?" Or like something you would never tell one of your athletes to do. Like, do you have anything like that? Or
Dude, it's got to be the hip thrust because we go to the commercial gym. Hannah and I go to the commercial gym now, and she even brought this up. But the hip thrust has to be number one. And I made the story post about it. How if you turn it into like a single exercise, it's not bad.
yeah,
But dude, if you're loading 500 pounds onto a hip thrust, you're number one. You're just wasting your time,
just
and it takes
squat.
5,000 years. I think even like a heavy rack pull is kind of like, what are we doing? Because I think rack pulls have a sense, but if I'm going to do a heavy rack pull, I'm just going to add accommodating resistance, and I'm not going to waste the time loading 650 pounds for a 3-inch lockout, you know?
So what's your vendetta against the speed ladders?
So the problem with the speed ladders is, so sprinting is all about like how much force you can push in the ground and how much you can generate to, sprint forward, right? And so
Mhm.
when you're doing a speed ladder, there's no ground force that's actually going into the ladder. All you're doing is you're moving your feet really fast in
Yeah.
fast motion. And so people say like it works on coordination. What, whatever.
I
But
mean, it
like,
could, but you could also just like field ground balls and that'll
or
work.
that, or you could just go sprint. Sprinting
Yeah.
is the most coordinating thing. So I think that's the problem where like people try to find all these outside of the box answers. And it's like you doing a karaoke machine or karaoke through the speed ladder and then adding a baseball glove to make it sport specific to make like you're working on your footwork is just a waste of time. And so that's why I say burn the freaking ladders as a whole. But like the burn the J bands is more of a fact that like it's a theory behind it. Like I
Okay.
don't think J bands are bad. I think it's the fact that we think arm care is just 3x10 external rotations, 3x10 internal rotations, and a couple of
That's a really good point because I know a lot of that's what I say a lot of our audience and people that I know that have mentioned stuff about the podcast to me like they'll hear like J bands bad and think how could you say that I use J bands every day and I think
yeah.
what you said is important that
I use J. I mean, I'm not saying
yeah.
I through gas, but I use J bands. Like,
Oh, but I remember even too, like being in that playing state, and you're like, oh shoot, I don't have time to go warm up. Let me just hit some J bands real quick, and you're not really doing anything.
yeah, it's like, what are you doing? Right? Like, if you actually take your time to like control the range of motion that you're trying to work through, or even do some like isometric, like let's say you go face pull with an
Yeah.
isometric scap retraction, like that's a different story. But if you're literally just doing J bands because it's what someone told you to do, and you don't have a reason as to behind why you're doing it, that's when we have an issue. And so that's why I would just make fun of like burn the J bands because it's
Yeah.
like this philosophy that pitchers have that, oh, I have to do J bands or else I can't throw today.
And another thing that I'll add to that with the idea of arm care is that you can't take the weight room out to the field with you. I mean, I've seen some teams they bring out a barbell and that's good for vibes and everything. But realistically, when you're at a game, when you're on the road, you need something quick to just like and that's why bands can be a good resource. That if
Yeah.
you need to have a warm up, if you need to have a system, if you can take, say, if I take 15 minutes to warm up, you give me these surge equipment, I can be efficient with it. But arm care as a whole, you can't just show up before a game or do something after. Because the exercise I have a problem with is the long distance running.
Yeah,
Because
that's so stupid. That's a
I
good
just
one. I
take
totally
cardio and you never run longer. It's literally just baseball. You never run longer than 16 seconds.
Dude, do you even know like I don't even know when people say like flush the lactic acid out, like what that even means. I just make fun of it because I don't even know what it means.
I don't either because I think I do know the only theory with cardio and why you should just get rid of it altogether is because it does help with your heart rate and it does help with blood flow. So as a general health thing, it can help. I mean, it's good. A lot of people use it for
I'm
losing
actually
fat. A lot of people use it. A lot of people use it for good reasons, but for baseball players, the idea is, like I said, 16 seconds is if you have an inside the park home run, you're going to sprint for 16 seconds. And if it takes you
yeah.
longer than 16 seconds, you're not getting an inside the park home run.
However, I saw a post I think like a week ago that it was actually a really good point in regards to the pitch clock and how
Yeah.
you have to recover quicker. And I don't think that has anything to do with cardio. But what this guy did is he took his cardio and then he'd implement breathing exercises with his cardio because it would spike his heart rate really fast, and then teach his body how to come back down to that neutral state. And I don't think that, I think you can probably do that without cardio, but I think again, it goes back to the sense that like, yes, cardio, like you don't need to do a long distance run because you're not running for more than 16 seconds. But if you have a reason behind the implementation of why you're doing cardio, then like fine.
Yeah.
Because he's doing it for his breathing purpose. So I thought that was kind of cool. In a
The
sense
only counter that I have to that is that I actually don't know what the rules are, but most high school and college athletes, you don't have a pitch clock.
No.
So you don't need to get into that right now. And that might be one of.
I was just saying it for all of our professional baseball players that are listening.
Right.
Which is 0.
No, come on. Well, I don't know. There's got to be a percentage. We're not that. We'll get there. We got to beat 30 views, I think. We got it off of YouTube Kids. That was the main issue.
Yeah, sorry. We put that on. It said, is this video made for kids? And I wasn't going to say no. So we threw it on there. And then we made the YouTube Kids account.
Oh, my gosh.
But yeah, so I guess the biggest thing going back, I think we got off topic. We never really touched upon it. So the biggest thing now that's evolved from me from EGT to now is like I have some sort of, dude, I don't even want to say system because like I like the system in the sense that it keeps me grounded and it keeps me kind of going off it, but I never want to be so confined to a system where I feel like I have to follow it to a T. So like, for example, I start up with Lombard West again next week and doing their off-season stuff. And something that I'm really looking forward to doing this year is last year I was so caught up, like we had to do our 10-minute dynamic warm-up every day because I wanted to make sure that they had a routine going into the spring. And I think this coaches love just dynamic warm-up. I feel like that's just kind of their time to shine. Like they love the fact that they have a planned skip routine and all that. And something that I'm going to do this year is we're going to do a few mobility exercises just to kind of get moving and grooving because it's at 6 a.m. and guys are going to be freaking rolling out of bed at 5:40. And then we're just going to compete. And I think that's something that even like a year ago, I wouldn't want to do. Like I'd want to make sure that we're doing hip FRC, whatever, squat hinge for our lower body days, and then push pull for our upper body days to prime. And then, get after it in the weight room. But something that I really want to focus on this year is just letting kids enjoy the weight room because I think there's so many, because the way it's kind of structured is freshmen through seniors is kind of just an open gym format for anyone to show up. And so like, yeah, you got the guys that have kind of gotten after it for a few years, but for a lot of kids, it's their first exposure to a weight room setting.
Yeah.
So if I'm shoving down this skip warm up down their throat and, and freaking reprimanding them for not arm driving their hands better. Literally, I could just tell them to go sprint after one another and play tag and get the same stimulus. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, because even think to when we were like 6 and 7, you played tag at recess and everything. Like at the end of the day, it's like, and something that I always felt is like I was never going to outbench somebody at 14, but I might be faster than somebody.
Yeah.
And I think breeding that competition is an important thing a lot of times because when you're doing the same things that reward the same results, there's naturally going to be sort of an aversion to it where it's like, oh, I know that I can't outbench somebody. I know that I can't out squat somebody. But at the end of the day, your sport isn't necessarily what can you do better in practice than somebody. And I think getting, like you said, especially at 6 a.m. too. And I wanted to ask a little bit more. It's like we have athletes, fall ball is ending, a lot of that new off-season wave. We're going to have a lot more of the team lifts. We're going to have a lot more of the 6 a.m. Work with 6 a.m. practices. So I think it's a good discussion to have. Like, what should the approach be in that? What do you want your athletes to get out of that? I think the competition is something that everybody wants to do, but I think that there's better ways to do it than other. And I wanted to see what your thoughts on that more.
Yeah, I think for starters, it's just like, let it happen. And I think when you show up with the intention, like, okay, we're not going to do an skip warm up today. And we're just going to show up and we're going to compete in our warm up. And so it's going to prime it. So because reality is like with these guys, I have an hour for probably 40 to 50 dudes. And so as much as I want to like follow a program, also there we have like 7-ish weeks with each other with, holiday breaks mixed in. So it's like I can't test them day one. I
No.
can't, test their broad jump, test their 10-yard flies like I would do with some of my other, more private athletes where I know I'm going to have them for a long period of time. And so like, so then it goes back to the question, like, what do I want them to get out of their 6 or 7 weeks together? Do I want them to, as a coach, do I want to just see their numbers go up? Sure. But like, more importantly, what I want to see them is like them, number one, growing together as a team, because a lot of them, this is their first time actually together. Guys are coming off football or other sports. And then also, like, I want them to, like I said, enjoy the weight room as a whole. And how do you do that? In my opinion, that's just competing. And so, like, what you'll see is I took this approach pretty much all summer with all my like college guys and like older high school kids, because I had them for a little bit. And it was fun because it was a group that I kind of intertwined. Like, we had dudes that were freshmen and sophomores in high school, and then like sophomores in college. And I think I even had an 8th grader in that group. And so like the levels of fitness were just like all over the place. And so again, it's kind of like, yeah, I had them for a little bit more time. So we did some certain testing parameters, but like what I wanted was like, I wanted that 8th grader to feel as comfortable as he possibly could with guys that were older than him. And only to get to that point, like, he's going to have to learn how to fail. He's going to have to learn that these guys are better than you, because not only because they're older, but because they've kind of gone through the process to get there.
Right.
And so like, when you bring in competition into that environment, I think it just only is going to help the athlete, and the athletes are just going to respond in such a better way because they're enjoying the training session and they're enjoying being there. Because the reality is that no one wants to be there at 6 a.m., but that's just the time that works for them. And so like, if you're shoving boring things down their throat and you wonder why they're still not getting the results that you want to see, it's probably because you're just shoving things down their throat that they don't want to do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think it's very well said. And I think any of your Glenbard West athletes should be very blessed this year. Like, you got a plan. Like,
we're ready to rock. We're done being middle of the conference in the W, whatever it is.
Yeah. And it takes that certain humility from coaching staffs we talked about this last week a lot, to just recognize, hey, if we keep finishing middle of the pack, we got to change something. Because at the pro level, you get fired if you have a couple of 500 seasons.
Right. No, that's why I respect so much the head coach over there at West, because like for these next 6 or 7 weeks, and it's like we've built a good relationship. Like, I played there and stuff, but like, I think that's something that you don't see enough at the high school and college level, especially, is head coaches kind of just like giving it off to someone else and trusting them to do a good job. And like, he's even said like, hey, I'm letting you kind of take this route, because like what he's doing is he's hiring someone that, is going to help them perform better. And that's kind of what the connection should be with the coaches. I think so much like these sport specific coaches and then the strength coaches, all they're doing is just button heads, because again, it goes back to like, Johnny hits a home run that day. Your strength coach wants to take the credit because he drove up his deadlift numbers. And the baseball coach wants to take the credit because he's been working with him since he was 8 years old, doing his load, nod, stride, swing off the tee. And so it's like, oh no, he's better because I got him this. It's like, no, like, again, it should be working together as a team. And that's why I respect what he's trying to do with his program, is like, he wants that. Like, he wants to have his guys actually see like value in this, because like when I went through the program, like, again, it's kind of just like you show up and you do your thing. Like, there was nothing really structured. Bless you, man. What's going on?
I thought I probably should mute that pot.
But yeah, no, it's just
shout out Sam Tyler.
I lost my train of thought, but like, bottom line is like, if you're a sport coach or you're a strength coach, your job should not be butting heads with one another. Your job should be to assist each other and, again, help your athletes grow. So
yeah, because at the end of the day, as a coach, you can try and control whatever you want, but there's no time where you have less control over your players than when they're out on the field in the game. So it's never a bad habit to, in your practices with your other coaches, to getting used to empowering others, to giving other people to say, you know what, you have the freedom to do this. You have the freedom. I'm going to give you instructions. You go and make the best of it. You go do it. You go. your coach telling you, you go get these athletes in shape for me.
Yep.
Telling these players, you go get better at hitting. You use these tools that we've given you, whether it's a pitching machine, whether it's a blast or a Rapsodo processing, whether it's this instruction I gave you, use that and go get better. And it's at the end of the day, because like you said, it's not either coaches versus, they can take the credit for it, but it's just correlation. At the end of the day, the only causal effect is that the player did this themselves. They accomplished that themselves.
Yeah.
That's why athletes have so much pride in their successes, because at the end of the day, they can give credit to people that help them along the way, but it's only their, it's something that's theirs. It's something that they've earned in a way. It's something that they've worked for, and it's a result of their labor.
But above all else, stay juicy.